The views and opinions expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of the staff and management of KLAY or those who advertise their products or services on this station.
Hello, and welcome to another action-packed episode of Ask an Atheist, where we're more concerned with how you think than what you think. I'm Mike Gillis, and my co-hosts this week are Sam Mulvey.
Hello.
And Jeremy Whitman.
Howdy doody.
So how are you gentlemen doing this week?
Pretty good. Been a heck of a week.
Been a heck of a week, and we're actually getting close to getting down to double digits in our countdown to backpedaling.
Oh, here we go.
For those of you who aren't familiar with this, there's a group called Family Radio, who has been putting up billboards, not all over just this country, but also going into the territories now, places like Puerto Rico, proclaiming that on May 21st, Jesus will return like a superhero, or Hulk Hogan, rather. Probably to some booming theme music and usher in the end times.
Actually, not just the territories. I'm hearing about it in South America now as well. So it's now an international phenomenon.
So there's some money behind this, then.
There is.
Is it still all Western Hemisphere, though? Is the Eastern, they get another day in the Eastern Hemisphere? They'll get some advanced warning if it does pay off, right?
Does the end of the world follow the international date line?
Everything that I've looked at seems to suggest that Jesus is a hillbilly from Atlanta, so...
Ah, okay. So
I do like
he's
to
coming here first.
that there is a bit of arrogance there, assuming that Jesus is coming back in their time zone.
yeah, you know, that was when I was writing our website, wecan'tknow.com, that was actually something that I fought with. It's like, okay, so it happens at a specific time on a specific date. What time zone? Being an engineer, I picked GMT, and I actually got a compliment on the code for the website because I made a bunch of jokes about it in the code, and somebody said, "My English teacher would love this because your code is like a story," and stuff like that.
So I think it's fair that none of us are going to be, holding our breath for Jesus to come back. But the end of the world, actually, they're saying that's holding back until October. So once this gets started, it actually moves along fairly slowly. So if you want to call May 21st the beginning of the end,
right.
I guess we're in the preamble to the beginning of the end.
The beginning of the beginning of the end.
What's supposed to happen in that space in there between May and October?
The beginning of the middle of the end.
Jesus
I
crashes
believe
the stock market. How does this all kick off?
Well, I imagine it would start by them all getting beamed up to heaven, and then a bunch of monsters come around with 7 horns, but 10 heads. I imagine that there'll be at least 3 heads that have more than 1 horn on it.
Ah, okay, so you're going straight premillennial dispensationalism, where you read through the Bible like a choose-your-own-adventure book?
Well, isn't that what everybody does?
Some more than most, I would say.
There's a wonderful use of the ellipses in this. But yeah, the May 21st, we're counting down. We don't know what's going to happen.
Actually, we're counting down to May 22nd.
May 22nd, the day after.
Yeah.
The day when the backpedaling begins. We don't know what's going to happen. I think there's 2 larger options. I think the first one is that they pick up stakes, scurry under a rock, and pretend it didn't happen. That's the less fun option. And option 2 is they pretend to win even when they lose. And I think this is the one they're preparing themselves for. They've spent this much money right off the bat.
The Saddam Hussein method.
Yes, the Saddam Hussein method.
They could also start their own church, sort of, Christian Science 2, this time it's personal.
Yes. That's sort of what Revelations is about, right? It's Jesus is coming back to make amends.
Oh, okay.
Yes. It's going to be interesting, but I can tell you we are asking to Ask an Atheist. You can give us a call at 253-584-1480. Talk to a real live atheist, and if you're one of these folks who believes the world is coming to an end, let us know, and also let us know what charity you're giving all your property to on the 21st.
Oh, and if you'd like to sell your house real cheap, let me know.
We will take care of your pets.
Yeah, there are actually organizations for that. Mm-hmm. I love that.
So, yes, let's talk about an email. We have an email from Ashara. Says, I'm an atheist. I was just wondering where you all started your search for information, where you were looking for the truth. The point is, how can a theist look at the same thing you were looking at and still think of it as proof for God? Am I looking in the wrong direction? So basically my question, where to start accurate, unbiased research? Sam?
Right. Well, first of all, this is Asherah from the internet.
Yeah, they didn't give a location there. So folks, if you are sending us stuff, give us a city and state or country.
Right.
Let us know where you're coming from.
Some idea where you're at. Personally, I think we're not getting our information from the same places. Like I've said on the show previously, my family is generationally freethinker. I've never really had to worry about what church I was going to or whether or not I was a church goer. I was allowed to make my own decisions. And when I was a teenager, like you do, I did sort of the grand tour of religions where I talked to clergy types from all sorts of places, and I learned that it was very subjective, not particularly real. So I had to make my own decisions about like sort of human truth, the sort of the humanist philosophy that for human problems there are human solutions. Now, if you're talking about the truth of the universe, that's what science is for. That's why we have physics. That's why we have science at all, biology, mechanics, things like that. So I guess it depends on what your definition of truth is, which sounds like an equivocation, but I think I've answered both sides of that.
Well, it's very important that you, when you're looking for truth, you need to understand what you're actually willing to accept as truth, what you're going to take as evidence is a big thing. And then the email asks specifically, how can a theist look at the same thing you were looking at and still think of it as proof of God? And what I came from is a background of going to Christian school every day and being in church 3 to 5 times a week, constantly my whole life up until I was at least 16 or so. And I would say that a theist is not looking at the same information I'm looking at, because all that time I was told that the Bible is ironclad,
right,
that there's no contradictions, that every time we've dug somewhere the Bible says to dig, we've found everything about it to be true, which is patently untrue.
Right.
So they don't even have the same source of information available to them if they're in that sort of closed environment.
Exactly. Everything that they read somehow has to fit this source that they've already decided is truthful, and I don't think it's truthful.
No.
I think it's also becoming a lot easier to keep yourself in that bubble these days. And if you look at, there is an industry of Christian media, of Christian literature, of Christian radio, even Christian fiction, that you can live entirely in that little world and never have it polluted with an alternative viewpoint.
Right.
And I think that's a real danger. And I'd say the first thing that I would do is take some community college classes. Look at what the facts are, and then try to use those facts as a foundation for understanding the universe. What is it that's independently verifiable? What is it that you can know? And I come from sort of an interesting standpoint where I guess I can sort of cut up in the middle, where Sam had more of a freethinker upbringing and Jeremy had much more of a religious upbringing. I guess you could say I dabbled in religion, or I was dabbled in religion.
You had a few experiences there in college, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
In the upstairs bedroom, passing around a Bhagavad Gita.
I went to a Catholic school from kindergarten to the middle of 2nd grade, which is kind of a glancing blow from religion, not really a square hit. And then really for the rest of my life, we never went to church, we never went to Mass, even though we celebrated things like Christmas. It wasn't really there, so I did develop on my own. There wasn't this overcoming search that I had to do because it never felt like there was any cultural barriers put up to it.
Oh, sure. And like I said, my family was freethinker, but we lived in we lived in the culture that we live, which is predominantly Christian. You know, we wish it weren't, but it is. And so we celebrated Christmas just like everybody else. We actually celebrated Easter just like everybody else because we like ham. But and Christmas was the big party holiday. We all got gifts. We all got together. We all drank a little bit. You know, it's still a good time. And I mean, we went over this a lot this December. So.
Oh, yes.
So if we break this all the way down, this email, and just focus on the last question, and it says, where do you start? And I'm going to take it, even though she says she's an atheist, I'm assuming that's a woman's name. I'm not sure about that. But I'm going to take it as a question that says, you're teetering, and you're looking for advice from this show. Where do you start your research?
Yeah.
And I would say you start by forming a foundation of being able to honestly evaluate facts without letting emotion override you.
Absolutely.
That's where I would say
that would be sort of the skepticism argument.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I think that's the importance of science, because science is definitely a method for understanding the universe that actively understands that humans have biases.
Right.
And actively tries to move around that. It says, okay, we need things like peer review. We got to move ourselves out of this notion of these sorts of feelings and go to what is it that we can what is it that we can do? What's demonstrable? What can we actually measure? What can we recreate? What can we use as a foundation to make accurate and reliable predictions? And personal experience, feelings, things like that usually doesn't do it. We have a phone call. Manolo from Benton, Kentucky. Welcome to Ask an Atheist.
Hello.
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 What have you got for us today? Hello, you're on.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Can
Hello.
you hear us?
Hey.
Hey, welcome to Ask an Atheist. What have you got for us today?
Well, I was calling early in the show because I wanted to talk to you something about the we can't know and the Judgment Day next May that you might not know.
Oh, let's hear it.
Well, I'm from the podcast that you started, the Spanish Atheist podcast, and one of the guys from the podcast just sent me an email with a map of all the billboards they have all around the world, and it looks like it's everywhere.
Really?
It's not just the U.S. I know you guys were talking about Puerto Rico. I'm from Puerto Rico, and in Puerto Rico right now they have 9 billboards, and the island is 100 by 35 miles. So
Wow.
you can imagine how intense the thing is down there. But you know, we're talking everywhere: Indonesia, Thailand, Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania. You know,
These
New
guys
Zealand.
have covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time, haven't they?
There's a lot
Yeah,
of money
and-
going into this.
There is.
Not only that, you know, they have billboards, they have printed ads, they have radio stations which are doing ads.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
translators.
I've seen cars decorated with the fact that the world is going to end.
And no matter how well-financed this organization is, they're still essentially the crazy person with the end is near on a sandwich board.
Yeah, repent.
They're just
walking
better
around
funded.
downtown. Yeah.
Much better funded, better production values.
Yeah.
I think it was funny that they had a printed ad listed in Nunavut territory in Canada, which is as far north as you can go, is up next to Greenland.
Yeah.
They had an ad up there. I guess it's for the polar bears, you know. 'Cause, the polar bears know the world's coming to an end anyway because their ice is melting, so they know
Just
that.
for them.
Yeah, well, okay, for the few hundred people up there. Say, so you've got this on a map.
Yeah, I can give you the address. It's on the internet.
Sure.
It's,
Shoot it off.
ebiblefellowship.com.
We'll
That was
definitely give that a
reliable.
look.
Yeah, definitely give that a look. And if you want to send
Yeah.
that to us in the email, and if anybody out there would like to send us an email, you can go to askanatheist.tv and click on the red button.
And if you want to ask us any other questions, maybe you don't have access to a phone, you're not listening to us live, that big red button will let you know. Also, if you want to give us a call, again, thank you, Manolo, for your call. We will definitely keep that in mind. Thank you.
Absolutely, son. Facebook, probably. Bye.
All right, thank you.
very much.
But yeah, if you want to give us a call, again, the phone number is 253-584-1480. You are listening to Ask an Atheist.
So, anyway, we were talking about this email about looking for ways to find truth, and you suggested going to taking some junior college courses, or
I think it's a good place to start. One, exposing yourself to the stuff that's out there. Finding a way. I think that again, that's a wonderful thing about science. Is that
Comparative religion course.
comparative religion course.
Actually, that's interesting. I know a lot of people who've gone into comparative religion, and that's one of there's 2 ways I know of from a Christian perspective to generate an atheist. One is to take a course in comparative religion. The other is to read the Bible.
Seminary is a good one, too. But
Seminary
that kind of
helps.
falls under the read the Bible category.
Yeah. And then you suggested something else, something kind of different. You were getting into it when we got the call.
Definitely, you have to understand how your thought process works, what you're willing to accept as a fact, what evidence you need. Is that evidence that this idea makes me feel good? Well, then you're probably going to be religious forever. But to be an atheist, for a lot of people, takes a lot of struggle, a lot of emotional struggle in their head, especially if you come up in a way that a lot of people on this show did, and I'm the biggest reflection of it on this episode, where you have an upbringing that is almost entirely religious. Every facet of it. My math books were religious.
Absolutely.
Growing up. So
Last week we had a whole show full of those guys.
Yeah.
So.
And it's a difficult struggle, and if you're in that struggle, I suggest very much just learning how to reason without flavoring that overly with emotion.
Right. And
That's the biggest key.
this is something we said 2 weeks ago, and I guess my take on this is, and this is, if you don't like the answer you're getting, if it's not pat enough, if it's not cut and dried enough for you, the thing is we don't really have a cut and dried answer. Is part of about being an atheist is it's a very simple philosophy. Once again, 2 words: no God. When you go from there, you kind of have to make your own decisions.
Yeah, that the personal responsibility for deciding these things is up to you. That I think this is something that both religion and conspiracy theories offer, is that you have what is essentially going to be a set of messy answers that lead to other questions. And a lot of people don't want to hear that. They want something very concise and something that covers all the bases, because it makes life more like a movie where everything gets tied up after 90 minutes.
Right.
Life doesn't work that way.
Life is messy, and messy is part of what makes it fun.
And part of what makes it interesting and beautiful, too, that I don't want simple, pat answers for something, because generally speaking, they tend to be wrong. That religion has been in the business of trying to explain how the world works, and sometimes going into places that we don't know. And often we will get the answer to those things later, and the answers that religion has offered have always been wrong.
And personally, and this is just a personal philosophy, is I'm in love with nuance. I love nuances. I love it when things shade meaning, when things change, when little ideas come in, second order effects. I love that sort of stuff. And the pat answer and the dogma really prevents nuance. Nuance is the spice of life in some ways, I think.
It prevents a lot of conversation, too, because a lot of conversation, you have to have sort of this common foundation of facts that you can agree on. Of course, you can disagree with how to interpret those facts.
Yeah.
But when somebody's basically giving you an answer that says, because I said so, you can't talk to that person.
Right.
And again, you are listening to Ask an Atheist. You want to give us a call at 253-584-1480. We'll be back in about 2 minutes.
I hate this PSR. Me too.
When Michael's father left 2 years ago.
I swear that voice is somebody doing a voice. That's like a Saturday Night
Welcome back
Live
to Ask an Atheist, and if you don't have a father, maybe you'd like to get in touch with your heavenly father. But change that dial, Thatcher, because we are not going to talk about that.
This is likely to use a knife or gun in a fight. You may think if you don't see your children, your influence on them is over. But you influence them in ways you may not
So
think of.
stay at home, be a drunk, and beat him
A
forever.
child without a father is 63% more likely to run away.
And we're back. You're listening to Ask an Atheist. Our phone number is 253-584-1480. And it seems like there's a little bit of information in the news. It looks like Ray Comfort, everyone's favorite petulant child and evangelist, is up to his old tricks. Jeremy?
Ray Comfort, yes, very petulant, very much a man who likes to be in the spotlight. And
I think we can safely say it's somebody you don't want to seek answers from.
Yeah.
No. Not even a conversation with.
He's got to be one of the most stridently dishonest people that I've ever seen in media, where I have seen on multiple occasions him being corrected on something and continuing to use the debunked answers.
Coming from you, that's kind of saying something.
Yeah, that says a lot. So Ray Comfort is the old school fire and brimstone sort of evangelist who likes to bring people to Jesus under the threat of eternal hell and torture and damnation. That is his stated way of doing business. And he seems, in my opinion, to be someone, this is strictly my opinion, who does not mind stretching the truth almost to breaking point to get a point across. But he has done something that may end up to be somewhat of a service for some of our listeners, and that is he is offering $10,000 if anyone can prove that evolution actually happens, which seems fairly easy.
It's sort of like the anti-Randy prize.
Yeah,
in a way. Yeah,
it is, and it actually seems pretty easy. But here's a direct quote from his website, which is Intelligent Design versus Creationism. Intelligent design versus evolution. There is an intelligent design versus creationism thing that does happen. But we have to. It's intelligent design versus evolution.com.
Okay.
And here's the direct quote. He goes, "Here is my challenge. I will give $10,000 to the first person who can prove to me that they have found a genuine living transitional form," which, by the way, might be Ray Comfort if he has children. Anyway. A lizard that produced a bird, or a dog that produces kittens, or a sheep that produced a chicken. So if you can find something that patently disproves the theory of evolution,
where one
to
modern
Ray
animal,
Comfort, yes,
one modern animal giving birth to a completely different modern species.
Like something out of a Disney movie. You will get $10,000, and somehow this will convince Ray Comfort that evolution is a true thing.
By completely disproving evolution.
Yes,
you will
it's
prove that
very
evolution is
strange.
true.
So either one option you have there is that Ray Comfort does not have even the slightest idea what evolution is, and yet actively disbelieves in it.
Right.
Or that he's a nut job and he's just wanting attention is the other option.
I think a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, but I think the column A part where he doesn't understand this is entirely intentional. This is somebody who doesn't want to know. This is someone who doesn't want to understand. And when somebody does offer him this information, because we know.
You see, in a way, though, this proof already exists in the lab with bacteria, because bacteria live and die fast enough for us to track it over the course of a single scientific study, where we've watched one species of bacteria develop to be able to process and digest nylon, a substance that did not exist in the Earth until 100 years ago or so. And this is evolution. We didn't cause these bacteria; they were discovered in nature, and then the process was recreated in the laboratory. So, in a way, if he's willing to actually believe the processes of evolution, this is something we've already observed. But what he's asking for is a bird giving birth to
a lizard.
An elephant or something. And you know what? If you can make that happen using natural processes, $10,000 from Ray Comfort is only the start.
Yeah.
You will be completely toppling one of the major theories of modern medicine.
Yes,
And the central pillar of all biology, really. I mean,
Absolutely.
all biology is based off of this central claim that all life has a common ancestor, and that it developed, and we have the diversity of life that we do through natural selection.
Yeah.
And right off the bat, he's basically asking people to prove something that it's not actually the scientists are not saying.
It's
Right.
interesting to me that you can write a 50-page introduction to The Origin of Species when it's apparent you've never read The Origin of Species. That is absolutely flabbergasting to me.
It is pretty amazing.
And this is what is going to draw us into the actual topic of this hour, which is why religion and atheism are constant topics in comedy, and also a tool for both sides, actually. Both sides of the equation use that tool. That is our topic this afternoon. And did we want to keep talking about Ray Comfort?
Well, he is a constant source of comedy.
He is an easily lampoonable man.
For those of you who aren't familiar with it, Ray Comfort actually...
Fillets a banana.
well...
Ray Comfort is this. He's a Kiwi. He's a New Zealander who's an import, and he is the Batman to Kirk Cameron's Robin. He does a lot of internet videos and has probably about 5 different websites where
Easily 7. Last I checked, a lot.
He likes to hassle atheists because I think we're the only people who pay attention to him. He believed that the banana was evidence for the existence of God.
Yeah, Way of the Master is one of his websites. Warning, contains no kung fu.
Yes, that is actually the biggest disappointment in his most terrible lie, is that there can be a television with that title.
But the thing is one of his big things is the banana thing, where bananas are somehow a source of proof of God because bananas fit a certain shape and they're the perfect food for men, except that the bananas that occur in nature are filled with seeds and are practically inedible, and bananas become what they've become today because of our interference.
Well, his banana analogy, it was actually analogous to a Coke can, was something that he came under such fire for. He did something I don't think he does very often. He removed that from the internet.
He did.
And you can only find really bad copies of it now. And now when he performs that bit, he performs it as almost a stand-up routine in and of itself.
Right, he's turned it into a joke.
Almost mocking himself because it was so ridiculous.
Yeah, he's trying to pretend that it was a joke the whole time. But when you watch Ray Comfort giving this routine in this old video, he's not getting laughter from Kirk Cameron, who's sitting right next to him, but he's getting looks of awe as if he's saying something truly profound.
Sure. But, I mean, this is sort of the early days of comedy and atheism and religion, if you would, is that it's a religious topic, and he's saying something for religion, but then he makes fun of himself, and haha, we can poke fun of this religion thing without actually attacking any of the precepts of religion.
It's a strange little layered system when if you've seen the original video and see him doing it in a way that seems to poke fun at it, you almost don't, is he satirizing himself, or does he still really believe it? It's an interesting piece to actually watch him do the bit now.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
I've heard that referred to as kidding on the square, where you're telling the truth, but you're just kidding, but you're really telling the truth.
Right.
And it's sort of sad because it's this weird sort of retreat without a retreat. This is something I fully expect the guys at the Family Radio do when March 22nd jumps around, is they're going to try to either play it off as a joke or do that same exact thing. It's really sort of amazing. Again, you're listening to Ask an Atheist. The number is 253-584-1480. If you want to talk to us, if perhaps you think that the banana is God's perfect food, we'd like to hear your evidence for that. Please give us a call. So, Ray Comfort, I don't understand. I mean, he is a source of comedy for atheists, and it seems almost like he's developed this routine aimed entirely at us.
Right.
Because I don't know of any Christians out there that actually seem to use him as a primary source.
No, I think he's somewhat of an embarrassment to a lot of Christians, I would say. But, yeah, he does seem to direct himself directly at atheists, probably because we do enjoy arguing with people.
We do enjoy arguing, and it's almost like his entire routine is aimed at us. He wrote a book that you can lead an atheist to evidence, but you can't make him think. A little funny, because when you actually ask this guy if what level of evidence it would take to change his mind, he says absolutely none. So evidence isn't actually a criteria for understanding why it is that this guy does what he does. I mean, it has nothing to do. There is no place in which evidence is tethered to what he believes. It looks like we... yes, Jeremy, as you were saying, atheism and comedy.
Well, when I first started sketching out this topic, I was actually more interested in atheist comments in the media, things you see now, which we haven't seen before, like House, which is a fairly comedic show, has an atheist in the lead role, which would probably have been unheard of 10 years ago. But what I immediately came to decide is, and this kind of relates to almost everything we've been talking about in the first email, because I always get the question from people if they find out that I'm an atheist and that I go to groups, they go, what do you guys talk about in the groups? You just all go, there's no God, and sit around and stare at each other for 30 minutes, or what do you do? And
at the bad meetings.
Yeah, at the bad meetings. That's, what a lot of people do not, I think, grasp about these meetings is that you could almost classify a lot of atheists as refugees from religion. People who have escaped religion, and now they're in somewhat of a support group. Mm-hmm. And for them, comedy is a hugely useful tool, because if you've been indoctrinated in religion at a high level for all of your life, and you've finally broken free of it, and you have, first of all, you might not know there's anyone else on the planet like you, depending on the level in which you were secured in that religion. You might know that there's other religions, you're obviously going to know that, but you might not believe that anyone else has ever come to this conclusion.
That reminds me a bit of these billboard ads, the atheist visibility billboard ads and bus ads that have been coming up over the last couple of years. A lot of them have been aimed at precisely that thing, is that if you don't believe in a God, you are not alone. And it's sort of amazing the amount of vitriol that comes up in opposition to these billboards when they're simply saying that we exist too, we're capable of being good people, and you're not alone, and this is a place where you can find like-minded people.
And it's very important that people be able to go to that, and this is where humor comes as a very important tool, because a lot of comedy coming out of people in a social situation where you are getting into in-depth emotional issues, a lot of fights end with jokes, actually arguments, not physical fights. Maybe a one-liner in an action movie would end with a joke. But, you know, if you're expressing a lot of pain, it can be a coping mechanism, and it's... In comedy, you want to shorten things up. You want to simplify it to its base bones, and it just starts to seem ridiculous, and you have the cathartic laughter when it's not appropriate to cry. So that became actually something I became very interested in, is that also the media side of it, but it is a very valuable tool for coping with any sort of tragedy.
You do make comparisons between comedy and philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, both of them, you kind of want to get at the core of why something happens or how something happens, and where comedy wants to strip it down to almost nothing and then very quickly amend that with something humorous and be done with it, philosophy then will add 8,000 to 10,000 words behind it and make it almost make it very hard for someone without a collegiate education or a lot of intellect and stick-to-itiveness and a big dictionary next to them to actually understand. So philosophy is boring comedy, is what I'm saying there.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, another thing that I've noticed too is, and you mentioned this before, that there's something involuntary about humor. That when somebody hears a joke or hears something that's humorous, you either laugh or you don't. And sometimes you'll even laugh at something that makes you uncomfortable. You'll laugh at something that actually offends you. And then you have this moment where you find yourself evaluating what it is that you laughed and why you laughed at it.
Well, comedy has an ability to challenge when it's done theatrically in some way. It has... Like most good art should challenge in some way. Sometimes it just comments, but a lot of times it will challenge. And comedy can challenge a preconception in a way that you can't challenge with just speaking.
So it may soften the blow a bit?
It will soften the blow, and it allows you to bring people with you to a place they might not want to go if you're doing it in a serious tone. But they will entertain an idea sometimes. People will be willing to entertain an idea presented humorously that they would not be willing to entertain presented conversationally. Like music also can do the same
I've
thing.
kind of noticed, we were talking about the character of House on television, is that a character can be acerbic and a character can actually be belligerent, but if a character's funny, you find yourself willing to go along with that character
Right.
in a way that you wouldn't if they were playing it completely straight. Then this guy's just a jerk.
And one thing I've noticed about comedy, especially when it comes to things like religion, and I kind of want your take on this, is in some ways to make a point to get people out of their skin. There's sort of an applied insensitivity that you apply to the subject, that you make yourself slightly more insensitive about something, or a little bit more stalwart about something, so that you can get out of it, make a joke about it, and then everybody else sort of sees a different position and then laughs.
I'm not quite exactly sure what you're saying there, actually, Sam.
Okay.
Are you saying that I can step outside before I present an idea? I can present it from an outside viewpoint that
sort of
none of us actually has the ability to take?
Under other circumstances, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's sort of getting saying something that might be in other contexts seem a little bit insensitive, but instead the purpose here.
Well, you can do it either way with comedy. You can definitely say it in a way that's insensitive, and that's going to depend on a lot of factors. Or you can say it in a way that it would almost be able to describe it as subversive, that you've kind of slid into it. You can, it's like any topic you approach.
Right.
Whether it be atheism, and I don't mean just in comedy, I mean in your daily life. There's a nice and not nice way to say thank you to a waitress. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
There's different ways of presenting it. So yeah, you can definitely present it in different ways to make it more accessible, less accessible. Even in the same piece of material done twice, you might do it in two different fashions, just based on who you know is going to be listening.
Do you have example of comics who deal with religion on either side of that coin?
Yeah. A guy right now working who will just come out and attack religion, and he's done it on every one of his CDs, and he's a very abrasive comic in general, and very fast-paced,
right,
and very blunt, is Doug Stanhope. And he is not for everyone. Let me say that right now. He is not for everyone, but he will not pull any punches. And sometimes people will leave the room. And that's going to happen.
That's happened on his CDs, I think.
Yeah, I believe so.
Very rarely do people include that.
Yeah, that will definitely happen if you attack it that way. Certain people will leave the room no matter what. Some people do, as Doug says, they do go to be offended. Some people are that uptight. And then there are other ways to, and this had to be practiced a lot more when America was a lot more conservative in the early days of radio and things like that, when Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner were working together. And there's definitely, stand-up comedy today, the only censor is your venue. And even they're not generally going to run to the stage and pull you off it if they disagree with what you're saying. They might not hire you again.
Right.
They might turn down the lights or something, but you can still scream. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. You're not going to get the obscenity
You're not going
charges.
to get the cane coming out like on a cartoon and yanking you off stage. No, obscenity is not going to happen. But back in the day, there were a lot of things you just could not say, topics you could not broach, and you had to be really creative. And one line that sticks out with me a lot, and I think is just brilliant, and it's subversive. It's a subversive way of doing this joke, is Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner and the 10,000-Year-Old Man.
Yeah.
And he asks him, what's your occupation? Or what was your occupation? He goes, when religion came around, I was one of the first ones in on that.
Oh,
very cool.
Brilliant piece.
Yeah, definitely. You are listening to Ask an Atheist. If you want to give us a call, you want to chime in on this, give us a call. It's 253-584-1480.
Jeremy, I was wondering if you, Doug Stanhope was one. Do you have any other comics that you'd like to point out as sort of modern trends in religion and comedy?
From across the pond, Ricky Gervais.
Yes.
Ricky Gervais. And there's something about a British intellectual being not threatening to Americans even when he's talking about religion.
His delivery as well. He's very good at saying really untoward things in a way that sort of implies that he doesn't quite understand that they're offensive.
In comedy, there's rules of getting away with things. If you have a puppet, you can get away with a lot of things because you're not specifically saying it.
Right. It doesn't work as well on the bus, though.
It does no. You should not bring your puppets on the bus. And the other big key to saying something that you might not be able to pull off is to put it in a character. And Ricky Gervais's comedy is arguably character-based comedy. He is not as aloof as he presents himself on the stage.
Right.
And he does some brilliant material. You definitely look him up.
Cool. He also recently did the Academy Awards and kind of made a splash
Golden
there,
Globes?
too.
The Golden Globes,
Golden
yes.
Globes,
What did he say there?
Well, I know that this is actually his second year hosting the Golden Globes, and they're, of course, shocked and horrified. I don't know why. They had him on last year, and he did the same thing. But he would introduce, like, Mel Gibson and say something like, hey, I love a drink as much as the next one, but not as much as our next presenter. Please welcome Mel Gibson.
Very nice.
And actually did end the last presentation of the Golden Globes by saying, and I like to thank God that I'm an atheist. And by the way, you're listening to Ask an Atheist, please. We'll talk to you in 2 minutes.
At the karaoke bar.
I can do it. I have to learn this.
Next, he tells the waitress
What's
she
up?
can be his backup singer.
We got
The
someone
question
online.
is, what's it like to lead people to the gates of hell?
He takes
Oh.
a shot and realizes he's not.
This is something I need.
So,
Have to do it.
We've got 20 minutes, but this is a call we want to take.
Yeah, definitely.
Portland, Maine.
and it's Glover, yeah, from
Glover.
Portland, Maine.
Style rap. He keeps repeating the line, "Don't read no gobbledygook."
You gotta be ready to dump him if he starts cursing.
Yeah, I'm ready.
In the station.
Bye-bye, Daddy.
When Vanessa's daddy walks out the door today,
Why do they play this over and over?
coming back,
Probably, I don't
she'll
know.
be twice as likely to drop out of high school, 37% more likely to abuse drugs, more than twice as Tacoma.
And we're back. We're on with Ask an Atheist, 584-1480, and we've got a phone call. It looks like Glover from Portland, Maine. How are you doing? Welcome to Ask an Atheist.
How y'all doing? Y'all can hear me all right?
Yeah.
I can hear you just fine. What have you got for us today?
All right, I was wondering, I've heard this Ask an Atheist show once or twice here on the YouTube and on the internet, and I was wondering, what's it feel like being an atheist, leading people away from Christ and straight to the gates of hell?
Well, I don't think any one of the people here believes in the gates of hell.
That is a question I actually get. We haven't really covered this. I am a road comic who does, on occasion, go into places in the Deep South, the more pious places of the country, and I am very forward about being an atheist. And I do get that question constantly, like, you don't believe in God, aren't you scared of going to hell? And it's patently ridiculous to me, actually, because when I cast off religion, I didn't keep the hell part. That's like asking me, you don't believe in Godzilla, aren't you scared when Mothra attacks Tokyo? I didn't keep that part of it doesn't compute with me. I don't mean to be belittling at all, but I don't believe any of that is true. If I thought I was leading people to hell, I would not be an atheist.
Yeah, but the Bible says that y'all are pretty much leading people to hell.
Well, there's an assumption there that we believe in the Bible. Again, this is Mothra. I think we're moving on to Rodin here. I don't think the Bible has any more authority than any other book. And in fact, when you look at the contents, I think
years
less.
of historical Christianity going all the way from Bible times, I think first century, what have.
Do you believe in astrology, sir?
Miracles.
Sir, do you believe in astrology?
No, I think that's tool of Satan.
Okay, well, it has a longer history than Christianity. Astrology has a history at least 3,000 or 4,000 years old. By that token, astrology has a lot more strength than Christianity.
I'm confused still a bit.
And there's a lot of religions that predate Christianity as well, not only Judaism, but the Greek and Norse religions. I would ask you, what evidence would you have, Glover, that the Greek and Norse religions are false and that your religion is true?
Well, let's see here. The fact that, well, there's salvation in the Bible.
Again, that's an assertion. I'm
There's
asking for
salvation.
evidence.
There's salvation in other religions too.
Yeah, everyone's making that claim, Glover. What I'm asking you is, what evidence do you have that the Bible and Christianity have that salvation and these religions do not?
No, all the evidence I need is the Bible.
Well, that's circular, though. If
That tells
all the
you
evidence you
everything you
need is the Bible, and the evidence that tells you that the Bible is true comes from the Bible, you're running in a circle.
The question I have is, why is the Bible evidence enough for you? What evidence do you have that the Bible is any source of information on what happens after you die?
Historical corresponding things that go on in there. We know that there was a historical Jesus walking around.
We don't know that, actually,
very
Glover.
questionable.
That's actually very questionable. There's only one extra biblical source talking about a historical Jesus, and that's in the writings of Josephus.
Yes.
And even there, that was published at least 70 to 100 years after this Jesus may or may not have existed, or at least is said to have existed.
If I remember right, there's a slightly more historical record for Mithras, who has a story vaguely similar to Jesus, but actually occurs somewhat earlier.
And here's another thing. Even if this Jesus is proven to be historical, what evidence do you have that any of the miracle or supernatural stories are true?
Well, I mean, we got the the Gospels, we got the Book of Acts, we got the Epistles.
These are all books in the Bible. We're asking for. We do not base our reality on the Bible. We are looking for extra biblical sources. And do you have them?
Well, let's see here.
Ding.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay.
I'm not convinced, and I really have to say, it's like, for instance, I'm going to ask myself, did Julius Caesar exist? I'm not just going to look at just the writings of people who really, really liked Julius Caesar and thought that he was right about everything. I'm going to look at other countries. I'm going to see the places that he went, and I'm also going to find people who didn't like him so much. I'm going to look for
Paul existed because we have historical accounts of him walking around Rome and also evangelizing all over Asia Minor too.
But here's the thing: even if he walked around and evangelized, how does that prove the supernatural claims of the Bible? Because I can show you a book.
And I'm actually going to take a step back and say that a lot of that stuff about Jesus walking around Asia Minor is not actually proven. There's very little historical record for it.
Well, what about whenever you go to Jerusalem, they have like the where Jesus was born.
This is what's known as tourism, Glover. They also, if you go to Turkey, you can probably find about 5 different places where Noah's Ark is found. I wouldn't necessarily buy any of that. There's a lot of money in Christian tourism, especially in the Middle East, in places like Jerusalem.
It's not that we're unconvincible. It's that we have looked at the evidence as objectively as possible and checked into the claims that the Bible is somehow supernaturally inspired and an ultimate authority on things like the age of the earth, whether or not Jesus existed, just general things that this book should know if it's actually inspired by God, and it falls flat, and the archaeological evidence is not there, and all of that. If we really actually believed that the Bible was true, and we were people who believed in God but had decided to ignore him and actively take people behind us to the gates of hell and evangelize in that fashion, that would be contemptible, and that's not what we are, and I actually get a little bit offended at the insinuation.
I do too.
I just care about what's true. It's not a question of me trying to prove anything wrong. I want the things that I believe to as accurately represent reality as possible. And there isn't a religion in the world that doesn't say that religion is true. There isn't the one that says, oh, Jesus died so he can be this wonderful of one of many options. The same way that the Muslims will say that only Allah is God and Muhammad is his prophet. And the only way to get through... the only way to get to paradise is that. There are many different ways, Glover, and I'm not convinced by any of the arguments you're making. I want to thank you for calling, though. We've got Brad from Pine City, Minnesota. Brad, what have you got for us today?
Yes.
Hey, Brad.
I wanted to talk about atheists in politics and how we need to confront people that say that we're not citizens, like our former president, Herbert Walker Bush was like
Bush Sr. That was Bush Sr., wasn't it?
Yes, that was Bush Sr.
Yeah, Bush Sr. And then you got there's several states in the South that have in their state constitutions that atheists cannot be or cannot run for public office, which goes against the federal laws of the land.
Not only does that theoretically go against the law of the land, that is the U.S. Constitution, that's actually been tested and struck down. It is known at all levels that is invalid.
But I think we as atheists need to get those on the state level, we need to get them to remove those conditions from their state. We can't just let the federal government, have the situation be, well, you ran, you're an atheist. Let's bring it to
I think what Sam was saying is that it doesn't have to be taken to the Supreme Court anymore, right? It is.
It's been tested. I know that since the 1960s, a lot of these same provisions usually not only bar us from public office, but bar us from serving on juries. That's been tested and struck down. This was tested actually recently in North Carolina, I believe in 2008 or 2009. That atheist is currently serving on a city council. These things are largely unenforceable, but it's amazing because I know that Arkansas is one of the states that has one of these provisions.
However,
and there was a state representative that actually tried to just remove the language.
In his defense,
even though there was a state representative that tried to remove this language, completely unenforceable language, it's amazing that he couldn't even get that bill out of committee. I mean, even despite the fact, like you said, these laws are unenforceable, the culture is still there, and that's that attitude toward atheists.
we need to have a more political, vocal, whatever you want to call it. We need to lobby or something. We're not.
I think actually what's happening right now, where there is.
We're citizens. You can't.
Oh, we're absolutely citizens. Doesn't matter what anyone says.
And I think as far as our intelligence and our money power goes, we can muster up some stuff if we wanted to. We have a couple of shows. This show and Atheist Experience, and there are other shows in other states.
Right.
They're not quite as YouTube prolific.
The function of the show definitely is not to start a political movement.
Absolutely.
No.
Well, I know.
What we would like to do is just put our position forward and have it get the same respect that every other position gets.
And I think that simply just the act of putting ourselves out there, of joining this conversation, being a part of the media, and knowing that people like us are out there, that is largely the thing that's going to change this. Largely like the coming out movement has changed a lot of the opposition to gay rights legislation that came about since the 1980s onward, is that it's us putting ourselves out there. It's at every conversation we have being out there as atheists, not necessarily pushing things into legislation, because I know that none of us here at the table want an atheist constitution, atheist laws.
No,
we want
I'm not
secular
saying
laws.
that. We want yes, I'm all about secular.
My fear in this case is that once we decide to take a political direction, once we start lobbying, we're going to be expected to pick a side politically. We're going to be expected to have some sort of party affiliation in some way, to have a platform, to have stances on things which have nothing to do with atheism.
The word atheism has nothing to do with politics.
Yeah, and what I know about atheism, even here in the Pacific Northwest, which you might expect to be very liberal, is that atheist politics is completely across the board. I know Republican atheists, I know Libertarian atheists, I know Democrat atheists. It's all across the board, and once we try to pick a political direction, the only thing that I can see coming from that for the first few rounds is infighting.
Because there really isn't.
I know that's how politics usually progresses, but again, we're atheists. We don't have to subscribe to any kind of. We just don't believe you've proven your God exists. So it ends there.
Well, I don't see why we would definitely need to turn into a political movement to do that. I do want to thank you for calling in, Brad, and it's definitely an interesting thing. I don't think there's any need for an atheist political movement other than a visibility movement, because aside from general church and state activism, which is out there, whether it labels itself atheist or not.
There are definitely times when atheists should get politically involved, when, say, a school board is under attack by creationists. But that really has less to do with being atheists than being people who go, you have no right to tell my child how to think or exactly what to think in that manner.
Would you guys agree to a movement to get those only Christians can be, or only religious people can be members of government out of the state constitutions, even if they're invalid?
It's a moot point. There's better things I think we can attribute our time to.
I'd be fine with it. I wouldn't make it my top priority, certainly. I think that certainly getting a lot of overtly creationist stuff out of science curriculum or social studies curriculum is much more important, and it's much because
these getting more accurate science in it.
Yeah, filling science class
folks
with science.
Yeah.
I guess the thing that I'm a little worried about is that I don't want to turn us into a political party. We don't need to be a political party. We don't need, as atheists, to take stands on, say, like immigration or healthcare, because there is no atheist stance on immigration or healthcare.
The moment we introduce any sort of dogmatic tenet into atheism, which you kind of have to do with any sort of political movement, it's no longer atheism.
Right.
So that's my stance on that.
Besides, like you said, there is this wide range of opinions that you can come to and still be an atheist. Ayn Rand and Karl Marx are both atheists. I doubt you'll get them to agree on almost anything.
That's a party I did not want to go to. That sounds like a fight.
Can you imagine a primary process between those two?
Missing limbs, also. No.
My money's on the Rand for that battle.
No kidding.
Yeah, she's fierce.
All right. I would expect Karl Marx to have some sort of armor protection from that beard of his. Like maybe, he'd deflect some level of stabbing with it.
Karl Marx's head is about 60% hair. That would definitely soften a blow.
I don't know.
But yeah, I think it's important for us to be involved politically, but atheism itself, like we said, this is not a philosophy. Atheism means not theism. So everything that isn't belief in God is not atheism. I mean, you get into things like, how should we feel about the death penalty? That has nothing to do with atheism because it has nothing to do whether God exists or does not exist.
Right.
Well, by all means,
anything you top on that's your own political or philosophical beliefs.
if you know 20 or 100 people who happen to be atheists and you all share the same political views and you would like to start a political movement and get involved, you have every right to do it. But I think bannering it under atheism is just a patently bad idea.
But falling short of starting that political movement, if you want to start by having a beer with us,
Yes.
we're going to be at Doyle's. It's on Mount St. Helen in Tacoma, downtown Tacoma.
Absolutely.
It's going to be great. If you want to be the people who are not watching the Super Bowl in the other room, if you the fact that you're listening to us right now says you're not one of those people listening to this, watching the Super Bowl in the other room. Please come join us. Have a beer. Have a sandwich. Have a conversation.
Absolutely.
So it looks like we have another one. Joe from Tacoma. Welcome to Ask an Atheist.
How you doing, Joe?
Hey, that's me. I had a couple questions for you guys.
Go right
Absolutely.
One, how come KLAY doesn't have you guys featured on the front of your radio station like the rest of the show?
Why is that? Have we
That's
just
a very
not
good
supplied
question.
them with any graphics or anything yet?
I've offered to offer graphics, and they do know the website. I'm not really certain why we're not featured. We're not part of the editorial process at KLAY.
They might have some contractual thing with because a lot of the stuff on the front is nationally syndicated programming too. We don't know.
There are some locally ones, but
I mean, if you
You've
look
stumped
at
an
the front
atheist.
page of their website, they actually have a lot of local shows that are done in the area, and you guys are not included. And it just seems, I mean, some brand new shows.
We don't
have
know,
on the front
and
of
we
the
will
website.
say they've
I
been
just didn't know
very
if they
supportive
were
of us.
embarrassed of having an atheist show on, and they
I
didn't
doubt it.
want that to look bad.
Joe, I would say from our experience dealing with the people on KLAY, the exact opposite is the case.
They're
I've
actually
never-
pretty excited to have us on, and if you'd like to, ask them about that, you're certainly welcome to. But they've been very supportive of us, and they've been very happy to have us here. And so,
if
Well,
anything,
they're happy to take your money.
they say
They're happy to take your money. I noticed there's no sponsors on the show, and so I wonder if there was a correlation between that.
Oh, Joe,
fact that you guys have no
that is patently untrue. Sponsors are something that we have to go for ourselves. We're actually beginning the search for getting sponsors for ourselves. That isn't something the radio show provides for us.
okay,
That is something individual.
We
being-
just actually got an answer from the booth.
yeah, we're actually we're technically a religious program, and therefore barred from the front page. So that's a station policy.
Equal non-time.
That makes sense because in our days at Scan, we were one of the awards we won was Best Religious Program.
Which we found somewhat.
But again, thank you, Joe, for
you have-
calling in. It's one of those things that I appreciate that people can be, I guess you could say, angry on our behalf. But it really isn't the case. I guess this is one of those instances where it's important to sort of learn your facts. Our relationship with KLAY could not be more positive.
Yeah. And I for those of you who are fans of the show, there's going to be more news about radio stations in the future. So
More front pages we're not going to be on.
possibly, I'm not at liberty to say.
But I think this is going to be an interesting ride.
I think
this
so.
Wonderful tool that is radio.
I really think radio is working out pretty well for us so far.
I think so. I definitely like radio. It is neato. So again,
Is it perhaps all you need?
I think radio is all we need. That public service announcement, it convinced me.
All right.
Again, Ask an Atheist is a production of NEDM Media. We air live from KLAY Studios in Lakewood, Washington. Our digital director is Beth Lehman. Call screener is Rebecca Friedman. Our production assistant is Bob Seidenstecker. Our co-host this week, Sam Mulvey and Jeremy Whitman.
Skippy Nits.
I'm Mike
week,
Gillis, and you can catch us online at askanatheist.tv.
We didn't get him halfway through.
Soothsayers! Soothsayers, all of you on!
That guy had more.